Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we do that with touch a lot. Like, sometimes when we do touch exercises, I'll say, in fact, I nearly always say to people, it is more important that you would just say, let your fingers or your hands be touched, but you can feel it, than let your whole body be touched, but you've
Right.
numbed out and you don't feel anything. So you have to be able to be able to limit it enough so that you can be with it, to be like, what is your capacity to hold that discomfort and not push way beyond it, because then actually nothing happens.
Right. And when you
Yeah.
say with it, what do you mean by that? Not
To-
escaping
yeah,
mentally?
to be not escaping in any way, so mentally or physically or numbing out, or like, so that you really are able to be with the experience fully. So that means to listen to what's going on in your heart, to listen to what's going on in your belly, to listen to the flow of energy in your breath and the thoughts that are happening, and like to be able to really to sense the energies that, like, what's happening in me when this happens, and to be with that experience. And that being with is just super important.
Yeah, it is. And do you find in your experience with the people you've worked with in your workshops, and do you find that and this is my own experience, where if I've been in something that's been uncomfortable, then I start making up stories about it, right? I'm telling myself different things about that I believe are true in the moment that are actually not even true. But in my discomfort, I'm making up stories to tell myself something as to why I'm feeling a certain way.
Yeah, sure. And so really a big practice, and I think that comes through in the book pretty carefully, is being willing to feel and like to go slowly enough that you can learn how to access your experience, how to not, because the stories is just another exit. It's a way of not feeling.
Yeah.
And everybody has their exits, and everybody has different ones. So learning what your exits are quite important, because then you can see, okay, here's a little red flag. I notice that story's coming up again, or I notice that I've suddenly started dreaming about, going on holiday, or I've noticed that I'm suddenly replaying some other thing from the past, or I suddenly have found the trees outside terribly interesting. Like, we all have our ways of
Yes, of exiting. And that was when I wanted to get to
there.
that. That was one of I have two favorite exercises from your book that I wanted to talk to you about, but then I also want to find out what your favorite is. But that finding our exits was that, and that's at the beginning of your book. And that one has been key for me right now in my own life, because and actually I talked to a friend about it too, because she was going through her own things and we were talking about this. And it's amazing to me how many stories I will make up to find exits, how many excuses. And so I guess before we go on, maybe we should explain what we mean by that, by finding
an exit. Yeah. So an exit is anything you do that takes you away from the presence of you in your body, feeling what you're feeling. So it could be, and sometimes exits, like there could be something like reading a book or reading a newspaper. It can be a perfectly productive activity, but it can also be an exit. So sometimes it's not that things are always an exit. Like there's nothing wrong with reading the newspaper, but you'll notice that if every time you're a bit stressed, you pick up your phone to read the news, then that's probably an exit.
Right.
And I mean, if there's the obvious ones like smoking, alcohol, drugs. So, there's a natural exits that just take you somewhere else. Making up stories from the past, making up living in fantasies. Those are definitely, I mean, of course, social media, phones, the addictive quality of phones is phenomenal.
Oh, completely. Totally. And it's amazing. I find in myself, it's just amazing to me, my capacity to make up these stories to find reasons why I should exit a situation when I'm uncomfortable, right? When I'm uncomfortable and I'm, maybe I don't want to deal with something at the moment, right? Or I don't want to talk about whatever's being talked about anymore, and I can feel it rise up in my body. Like I can feel it as this actual feeling of the instead of the fight, it's the flight. Like I can feel the flight in me wanting to run away.
Yeah.
So after reading this and reading through the exercise in the book, and what I'm finding when I just sit with it, first off, it's not as bad as it seems. It's not as bad as it seems. Second off,
Yeah.
I can actually start to see some of the ridiculousness in the stories that I'm making up. And I'll ask myself, like,
Great.
is it even true?
Yeah.
Do you have any proof of that? Right.
Yeah.
And the answer is no, I don't have any proof in that. But and I can see these exits, then I can see the pattern of the exits over my life, like why I haven't done certain things or got certain things, or why relationships ended this way or that way. Right. I can see the exit points where I've done this. And so I found that one very fascinating. I really loved that one.
Yeah.
The other one I wanted to tell you about really quick that I love was the one, it's at the end, and it's seeing the Buddhas in disguise.
Oh yeah, that's beautiful. That's a really beautiful
that one is that I love that one. And I want to read the quote that you have in there, but can you explain that?
So it's really like when you see every person, at the core of their being, they're pure, like they're innocent and pure spirit. And of course, we have all these layers of humanity and wounds and difficulties and struggles that kind of mask us and come in front of us. Right. So it's like when you see anybody, you see through that layer of all those layers, and you aim to see through to the core of their being, that in everybody is a shining light. And then, there's something beautiful in doing that.
Oh, I love that. Seeing the goodness in everyone. And you, in that section, the quote that you had at the end, which I also loved, was a quote from Longfellow. And it says, if we could read the secret history of our enemies, we should find in each person's life sorrow and suffering enough to disarm all hostility. I absolutely love that. I mean, it's very, for me, my personal tendency is to be rushing through everything, be annoyed by everything, be annoyed by whatever in the world. And when I stop and think about why I'm that way, I don't have an answer. There's no answer for that. And so this exercise of seeing the Buddhas and everyone in this quote really got me to be like, wait a minute, I need to check myself here when I'm out in the world, right? Is this how I want to carry myself? Is this how I want to be? No, it isn't at all. And that even when I'm on the phone, if I'm annoyed that I have to call about something, I've been on hold for a long time and I'm annoyed. I am envisioning this when I'm doing it. I'm seeing the person in their pure light rather than seeing it through the lens of annoyance or frustration that I've had to deal with this or that, because the person, it has nothing to do with that, right? They're not the one that, they have nothing to do with that. So I really loved both of those exercises from your book.
Lovely. That's great to hear. Thank you.
What was your favorite exercise that you included?
I think probably one of my favorite, I mean, I liked all of them. I think one of my favorite ones is just the one where I have people just like stroke and touch their own body and hold themselves with love, because I think one of the things that I know from my work and just witnessing people doing touch exercises is that basically none of us get enough touch. We just don't. Right. And even if we get enough, it might not be the right quality. So, and we don't even know it. So to have people begin to touch themselves and bring love to themselves through touch, it just reminds me of the ways that the moments when I've seen people just like they've been terrified of touch, and then they get some touch within boundaries, and their whole being lights up. Like suddenly there's something opens and relaxes that lets people come home to themselves. We just need touch, and touching ourselves and bringing love to ourselves, I think, is just really important. So I think that's one of my favorites. I
remember my own journey. This has been probably 5 or 6 years, probably 6 years ago now, when I was really starting my own journey of healing. And I was just at a point similar to you. I can't exist like this anymore. There has to be something different. And I was in a job. I had just gotten out of a relationship that was terrible. I was in a job I didn't like. I was in a town I didn't, all of these things. I just wasn't satisfied. And my commute to that job was probably like 45 minutes one way. And so the whole, the script would start as soon as I got in the car and on the way home. And I remember on those trips, reading about putting your hand on your heart. Just like actually touching putting your hand on your heart. I couldn't even do that exercise for probably a couple of months, because it was so emotional for me to give myself such simplistic love that it was overwhelming. I couldn't do it. And as I think back on that in that time, especially like what you were talking about with needing touch or needing like to be kind and gentle to ourselves. I mean, now I look back and I can't imagine not being able to do that for myself. But I bring that up because if anybody is listening who's experiencing anything like this, or in the early stages of this, it's such important work and it's worth it. Like I couldn't do it at first, but I didn't give up. I kept trying because I knew there was something different. And so that I specifically remember that time, and just even holding my hand on my heart and just crying on the drive because it was so emotional. It was so emotional.
Yeah. I think, you know, I would say a big part of living Tantra in general, it's not only about getting to know yourself, it's about getting to love yourself. But of course, you can't love yourself unless you know yourself.
Right.
So it's about really bringing love home here, because if we can't love ourselves, we can't spread love out either. And we can't live it. We can't be that. So, yeah.
So you have a chapter on opening ourselves as sexual beings and then meeting others as sexual beings. So how does this help us to maybe open our hearts and even deepen our intimacy? Because you talk about intimacy in the book too, and deepen that intimacy with ourselves and with others.
Yeah. So what most people growing up in the West haven't had, like when they went through puberty, they didn't have aunts and uncles and mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters who said to them, wow, this is a great transition you're going through. You know, you're turning from a boy to a man, you're turning from a girl to a woman, and that's a wonderful thing. And you're going to begin to start feeling some sexual urges. And that can be really beautiful and exciting. And this is how you explore it. And this is how you befriend now this really big part of your body and your being, which is your sexual energy. And this is how it all is. And you can be comfortable with it. And this is, if you have problems, come to me. So we needed that, but almost nobody in the West got that. So puberty for most kids is a nightmare. It certainly was for me. It's confusing and a struggle, and sexuality is just something that it's like a big tangled knot of what am I supposed to do with this?
Right.
And so we shut it down, and the church certainly hasn't helped. None of the religions have helped one bit, that's the essence of Tantra, is instead of splitting sex and spirit, we bring them back together. So we get the beauty and the purity of it. The thing is, if we miss out, if we suppress and wipe out our sexual nature, it's the source of our energy. I mean, sexual energy is huge. It is it's a big part of our being. And if we shut that out, we can't really land in our body.
Right.
Because we turn down the most powerful energy of creation, which is the force of sexual energy. So we have to come into contact with it and befriend it and get to know it in ourselves, so that we can be whole and love ourselves. Otherwise, there's like this great big elephant in the room that we've just wiped out. And so owning our sexual energy and discovering what it is for us individually, that's really important. I don't ever tell people how they should be sexually or how they should experience it or live it, but it's about who am I, and can I allow that? Can I accept that and love that in myself and meet that? With all the feelings that go with it, and with all the, an awful lot of people, unfortunately, also have a lot of trauma around touch and sexuality. So, all of that has to be dealt with as well. So when we come home to that, we can come home to ourselves as a whole sexual being, as a man or a woman, however that expresses. And that enables us to kind of land. People say they land more solidly in themselves, like they can be there because they've owned that part of themselves. Of course, and then of course, once we've found it in ourselves, it's our basic biology is to connect with other people. That connection is super important. We don't exist as islands in the world. We exist. We need connection. We don't survive or thrive without connection. So naturally, we meet other people in that energy, and then, of course, we need to learn how to do that, because That means being able to be uncomfortable, being able to be willing to say what's true for us and express boundaries and say no. I mean, that yes and no, that's a really important